So the Google Pixel 6a has been getting so much hype for having the same processor, the same software, and a nearly identical design to the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro. So if you're looking to buy a new phone, that probably begs the question of which one should you get? Should you just get the most expensive Pixel you can afford, or is there even a noticeable difference? So we've already seen the Pixel 6 go on sale for $499, just $50 more than the Pixel 6a. And so it really becomes a close call here, and I've actually been walking around with all three of these phones in my pocket like an absolute psychopath. And so in this video, I want to dig into the differences in display, in camera quality, in design, and even do a blind camera test to really figure out what the differences actually are, or if you should just save the money and just get the Pixel 6a. So for anyone new here, I'm Mike O'Brien, and like I said, we're talking about the Pixel series, the 6, the 6a, and the 6 Pro. All of them are great phones, but you might also have the question of, what about the other option, being the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro? Should you wait a couple weeks to get those? Well, I'll be covering those as soon as they come out. So if you guys want to see that, be sure to go down and click the subscribe button. And while you're down there, leave a comment and let me know what you think or expect of the Pixel 7 series. Curious to see what you guys think of that series. Let's start off with the physical design. Each has 3 colors, not the same 3 colors, but they're all gonna have a lighter tone on the bottom and a darker tone on the top. And a really similar appearance in general. You have the black bar for the cameras. Although the bars are a slightly different size, they're still all a very obvious Pixel, even from across the room. You know you're using a Pixel. And the benefit of the Pixel 6a is from a distance, you can't tell that is not the Pixel 6 Pro. They do look really similar. But up close, you'll see that the 6 and the 6 Pro have an almost identical camera bump, some subtle differences with the color of the rails, and I'll mention that in a second, but similar size, similar shape, similar location. Really the only difference on the back of these is going to be the 6 Pro is a little bit taller. But comparing to the 6a has a much smaller camera bump. This is kind of a positive for pocketability, and overall the phone is smaller, which I really do like, but got a little subtle drawback here, and maybe that's just because I've been using the 6 Pro for so long, but I find that I actually use that little ledge to hold the phone, kind of a little like, almost like a pop socket in a way, and so I like having that there. But again, maybe it's only because I've gotten used to that. Switching over to the Pixel 6a, I feel like I always put my finger there, and it's such a small camera bump that you don't even really, there's nothing to grab. But, you know, both good and bad there. Now, around the phones, you have a matte rail on the 6 and the 6a, so it's a little bit less premium versus the really nice premium glossy, like very gold-looking rail on the 6 Pro. Additionally, you're getting Gorilla Glass Victus on the 6 Pro, Gorilla Glass 6 on the regular, and just a plastic back on the 6a, which means that of these, the 6 Pro is the most resistant to cracking, but it is a little bit more likely to get scratched. With that said, plastic backs get a lot of hate. I would say that this one is the best plastic back on the market right now. Side by side, I would bet in a room of 10 people, maybe one, probably not even one of them, would identify which one is the plastic back. They look and feel so similar. Google did a fantastic job with that. There's a subtle difference with water resistance as well. The 6a is IP67 rated, which is awesome for a mid-range phone, while the 6 and the 6 Pro are IP68. Super subtle difference. It's basically an extra like 10 or 15 minutes at 1 meter deep in water. Again, subtle difference. They're all gonna be pretty solid. But the 6a does actually lack wireless charging on the back. That is something I'll talk a little bit more about when we get into the battery comparison. But let's flip the phones over. Let's talk about the front of these. All three of these have a pretty decent display. They have an in-screen fingerprint sensor. They have a camera cutout on the top for the selfie camera, but very different display sizes. We've got 6.1 inches on the 6a, 6.4 inches on the 6 regular, and 6.7 on the 6 Pro. In addition to that, you're getting different refresh rates. You're getting 60 Hz on the 6a, 90 Hz, and then 120 Hz on the 6 Pro. 120 is obviously going to be the best. It's the fastest, smoothest display, but the 6a at 60 Hz is really not a big deal. I think a lot of people kind of blew this out of proportion, but to be honest, most people buying a mid-range phone are not coming from an iPhone 13 Pro Max. They're coming from another mid-range phone or a budget phone. And so 60 Hertz is going to be what you're used to anyway. And honestly, after using this, it doesn't feel bad to me at all. Maybe some models were different. Mine has been really pretty fine. The 6 and the 6a both have a flat Full HD OLED display. The 6 Pro has an LTPO OLED Quad HD Plus display. It's also slightly curved. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, essentially the 6 Pro is definitely a better display. When you're looking at it, it's more detailed, better color, better blacks, and on top of that, a smoother, faster display. Now, putting them side by side, the 6 versus the 6A and the 6 versus the 6 Pro, each one is kind of an incremental difference that's not really that big of a deal, but looking at the 6A versus the 6 Pro, you'll definitely notice the difference in the screen quality there. As I mentioned, all three do have a fingerprint sensor. Honestly, it's really not a good fingerprint sensor. They all have an always-on display. They all have HDR capabilities. And back to the display one last time, people mentioned that there were like shadows or rainbowing with the 6A. I really haven't seen much of that. I don't think it's really an issue. I think the 6A is a perfectly usable display, and I can't really complain about that, especially at this price. But all things considered, the 6 Pro is going to have more vibrant colors and less errors. Now, as I mentioned before, the 6 Pro also has that curved display on the sides, which gives you a narrower bezel appearance, while the 6 and the 6A have definitely chunkier bezels. So spec sheets on the design and whatever, that's one thing. But the actual experience with these phones, well, I'll say what I like about the 6A is the overall pocketability and the one-handed usability. Like, it's a smaller phone. I like smaller phones, even though I have like relatively larger hands. Like, I can reach around phones pretty easily. It's just more comfortable to have a smaller phone. In addition, it's thinner as well, so more pocketable, easier to fit, and even with the case, it's easier to fit in your pocket. And the plastic back on here, I mean, Google did a fantastic job with that. Props to Google for making this feel like a glass back even when it's plastic. The lack of wireless charging was something that was holding me back. Again, I'll talk more about the battery life in a minute, but I'm just so used to always setting this on wireless chargers at my desk and other places around my house just to kind of top off the battery all the time, so I'm not worried about plugging it in. With this, having to plug it in was a little bit of a setback. In addition to that, the 60 Hz display and the large bezels around there are a slightly less premium experience for sure, but compared to the 6 regular, you don't really notice that much of a difference. But the biggest difference between these phones, by far, on a spec sheet as well as with your experience, has to be the camera. If you only get one thing out of this entire video, it should be the camera comparison. So looking at these three phones, the Pixel 6a has a tried and true 12 megapixel sensor for the wide angle and for the ultra wide lens. And then on the front, we have an 8 megapixel selfie camera. We'll talk about the selfie in a minute, but with the rear lens, again, this is a sensor that we've seen on so many different phones for years now. Like, it's a really old sensor, but Google's been iterating on this so much. And now with the Tensor chip on here, not only do we have better photos than the previous Pixels, we also have better video capabilities as well, but not quite to the extent that we see on the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro. So the Pixel 6 has the new 50 megapixel wide angle, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a 8 megapixel selfie lens, while the 6 Pro has that same 50 megapixel wide, a 48 megapixel telephoto lens. This is huge, and the 12 megapixel ultra wide, as well as an 11 megapixel selfie lens. So that's a lot of numbers there, but let's break it down. Essentially, the Pixel 6 and the 6 Pro both have that 50 megapixel wide angle lens, while you're getting 12 on the Pixel 6a. But megapixels are not everything, right? And typically what you're doing is you're actually going to be binning that anyway, so the output is a really similar size with these photos no matter what. But the benefit with the larger lens, larger sensor, is you're able to let more light in. So in lower light environments, you're going to have better photos on the 6 and the 6 Pro versus the 6A. But if you go outside and just toss it a real easy shot, just a regular nature landscape or portrait or whatever, the Pixel 6a is almost indistinguishable from the 6 and the 6 Pro. If you're using something like Snapchat or Instagram, the better quality sensor is really going to shine a lot there. But pretty much any normal environment during the day, just a standard shot, you won't really notice a difference. So for example, right here I have two shots. They were both taken outside, and you can leave a comment below, vote on which one you think was the 6A and which one was the 6 Pro. So the answer was the 6 Pro was on the left. Now, when it comes to the ultra-wide sensor, again, these are all doing a really similar job, being 12 megapixels on all of them. The telephoto lens on the Pixel 6 Pro is a huge, huge advantage. I used to say that I would rather have an ultra-wide. I changed that. I would much rather have a good telephoto lens on any phone camera. That's my most used lens on here, because if I'm taking a shot of something far away, obviously I'm going to use that. But more importantly, if I'm taking a portrait, I would rather go further away and kind of zoom in and use a telephoto lens, because you're getting less distortion, you're getting a better natural bokeh on there, and overall I think the shots just look better in general. So the telephoto lens is a huge positive for me, and I use that all the time. That's something you're definitely missing out on the 6 and on the 6A. Now when it comes to video, well, let's just get into a video test. I think you'll see which one's actually better there. All right, so here we have a video with the Pixel 6a and the Pixel 6 Pro. You can leave a comment and let me know which one you think looks better, but one thing you'll definitely notice is that there is a lot more of a bokeh, a lot more of a natural blur with the Pixel 6 Pro compared to the Pixel 6a. If we walk around, they're both very, very stable. You can jump around with them and you'll notice not a whole lot changes there. And they also both have really great colors. So the Tensor chip is doing a fantastic job with both of these sensors, but let me know which one you think looks better. Okay, so this is a very, very dark video. But you can see in almost absolute darkness here, the Pixel 6 Pro is definitely showing a lot more detail than the Pixel 6a. So looking at the front-facing cameras, this is where you're gonna see a massive difference. The Pixel 6a is limited to 1080p. Also, dynamic range, it's not nearly as good on the Pixel 6a. You can see a lot of blown out sky in the background. So this is kind of a shock to me, but the Pixel 6, the regular Pixel 6 for $599 is only shooting with 1080p on the front camera. On top of that, blown out sky, really, this is on par with the 6a, but definitely not in line with the 6 Pro. Whereas the 6 Pro honestly looks really good in my opinion. Otherwise, they pretty much all have the same features. The magic eraser, the face unblur, the night sight, the portrait mode, all that stuff. And you probably won't notice a difference in many situations unless you're using either a low light environment, you're zooming in really far, or you're taking videos. Those are the three things where I think the Pixel 6 Pro is really going to shine over the 6a. But like I said, in most natural environments, if you're outside at like a soccer game or something, the 6a and the 6 Pro are almost indistinguishable. That's how good the 6a processing really has become. Now let's talk about the super exciting topic of the internals on this phone. I promise I'll be brief, but there is one important thing you want to know about this. The RAM on here is 6 GB on the 6a, 8 on the 6, and 12 on the 6 Pro. So that just means essentially you can have far more apps open on the 6 Pro, and it's gonna feel like a faster experience. They all have the same Tensor chip. They all have 128 GB of base storage. With the Pro, you're able to get up to 512. And of course, the batteries in these are different as well with the size. You're looking at 4410 versus 4600 versus 5000 milliamp hours. That doesn't really equate to much because it kind of scales with the screen size, and so from my testing, they're all approximately the same battery life. But when you're charging them back up, the Pixel 6a has 18-watt charging, which is relatively slow for a modern phone, and it doesn't have wireless charging. The Pixel 6 and 6 Pro both have 30 watts, and they have wireless charging, so it's a much easier and faster experience to charge your phone up. And of course, when it comes to the price, this is definitely the biggest thing to consider. You're looking at $899 for the 6 Pro, $599 for the 6, but like I said, we already saw that for $499 about a week ago, and the 6a is actually half the price of the 6 Pro at $449. So is it worth getting two Pixel 6a's instead of a 6 Pro? Well, it obviously depends on how much money you have available. The 6a is absolutely going to get the job done. But if you want that better camera and if you want a better display, the 6 Pro is going to be a better phone. But I think for most people, I don't know. When you start involving dollars, it's so much easier to say mid-range are always a better value for your money. But if the money's there and you can spend $900, the 6 Pro is definitely a better experience. So if you enjoyed that video, consider liking and subscribing. I'm Mike O'Brien. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.